Have you ever watched someone treat a stranger like they were invisible, only to discover that stranger had the power to change everything? The morning my entire life changed didn't begin with applause. It began with silence, not the peaceful kind, the painful kind, the kind that fills a room when everyone decides another human being isn't worth noticing. And before this story is over, the man who spent years making my life miserable would lose everything he thought made him untouchable. But to understand why that happened, you have to meet the people who never saw me coming. If you've ever been overlooked, underestimated, or treated like you didn't matter, hit that like button, subscribe, and stay until the end. Because today's story proves that kindness isn't weakness, and sometimes, the smallest decision becomes the greatest revenge of all. My name is Ethan Carter. I'm 44 years old, married to my best friend Emily for 17 years. We have two amazing kids, a mortgage that always seemed one payment away from disaster, and a life built on hard work instead of luck. For 11 years, I worked at Northbridge Logistics in Chicago. I wasn't the loud guy. I wasn't the office politician. I wasn't the one laughing with executives over expensive lunches. I was simply the man everyone depended on. Need a broken account fixed? Call Ethan. Need an impossible deadline met? Ask Ethan. Need someone willing to stay until midnight while everyone else went home? That was Ethan too. Everyone depended on me. Nobody rewarded me. For years I convinced myself patience would eventually pay off. Hard work always wins. That's what my father taught me before cancer took him. Character always beats shortcuts. I believed him. Until I met Victor Hale. Victor became operations director 5 years after I joined the company. From the first day he carried himself like success belonged exclusively to him. Expensive tailored suits. Perfectly styled silver hair. A smile that never reached his eyes. He had an incredible talent. He could steal someone else's accomplishment so naturally that people actually congratulated him for work he'd never touched. The first time it happened, I thought it was a misunderstanding. The 10th time, I realized it was strategy. Every victory became Victor's. Every mistake belonged to someone beneath him, usually me. I remember rebuilding our largest shipping contract after another manager nearly destroyed it. 3 straight weeks, 4 hours of sleep each night. Emily drove dinner to my office more times than I could count, because leaving my desk wasn't an option. When the client renewed a multi-million-dollar agreement, the entire company gathered in the conference room. Victor stood proudly at the front. Our leadership team delivered outstanding results, he announced confidently. Leadership team, not Ethan, not the people who actually saved the account. Just leadership. Everyone applauded, including me, because I still believed someone upstairs noticed the truth. Looking back, that might have been the saddest part. Not Victor stealing my work, but me believing justice was quietly taking notes. Year after year, my performance reviews sounded identical. Exceptional reliability. Outstanding operational knowledge. Consistently exceeds expectations. The words changed nothing. No promotion. No meaningful raise. No recognition. Just another handshake. Another promise. Another year. Until one rainy Tuesday morning, I finally gathered enough courage to walk into Victor's office. I'd like to discuss my future here, I said carefully. He didn't even look up from his laptop. What about it? I've been in the same position for years. My performance speaks for itself. I'd like to know what I need to become regional operations director. Victor slowly closed his computer. That silence lasted only a few seconds. But somehow, it felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. He leaned back, crossed his arms, then smiled. Not kindly. The smile of someone enjoying what came next. Ethan, you are excellent exactly where you are. I frowned. I'm not sure I understand. Oh, you understand. He leaned forward. The truth is, people like you aren't leaders. The words landed like punches. You work hard. You're dependable. But leadership? He chuckled. That's something you're born with. I forced myself to stay calm. So, what specifically do I need to improve? Victor laughed softly. I'll be honest. You're lucky we even pay you what we do. He folded his hands across the desk. There are dozens of people who would happily replace you for less money. For a moment I couldn't hear anything. The office disappeared. The rain outside faded. All I could feel was my heartbeat pounding against my ribs. 11 years. Thousands of overtime hours. Missed birthdays. Canceled holidays. Late-night dinners. Alone at my desk. reduced to being replaceable. I stood slowly. Thank you for your honesty. Victor smiled proudly. I thought you'd understand. I walked back to my cubicle without saying another word, sat down, opened my computer. And while everyone around me continued typing like it was just another ordinary Tuesday, something inside me quietly changed. Not anger, not sadness. Something colder, much colder. I didn't know it then, but fate had already begun moving the pieces. And in less than 3 weeks, one forgotten old man sitting alone in our company lobby would destroy everything Victor Hale had spent years building. Every revenge story has a moment when fate quietly changes direction. Most people never recognize it. I certainly didn't. That Wednesday morning began like every other disaster disguised as a normal day. My 10-year-old son couldn't find one of his school shoes. Not both, just the left one. After 20 frantic minutes of searching, we finally found it beneath a pile of football gear in the garage. By the time I kissed Emily goodbye and pulled out of the driveway, I was already running almost 20 minutes late. Normally that would have stressed me out. Victor hated late arrivals, even if you stayed 3 hours after everyone else left. His rule was simple. Being seen arriving late mattered more than actually doing your job. Rain drummed softly against my windscreen as I parked beneath Northbridge Logistics headquarters. The giant glass building looked as cold and lifeless as ever. Employees rushed through the revolving doors with coffee cups in one hand and mobile phones in the other. Nobody made eye contact. Nobody smiled. Everyone was busy pretending everyone else didn't exist. I hurried into the lobby, then stopped. An elderly gentleman sat quietly near the large front windows. He looked to be somewhere in his late 70s. His posture was perfectly straight. His charcoal overcoat was beautifully tailored. A worn leather briefcase rested neatly beside him. He wasn't scrolling through a phone. He wasn't reading. He simply watched people pass. Patiently, almost thoughtfully. At first I assumed he was waiting for someone. Then I noticed something strange. At least 6 employees walked directly past him. One security guard glanced in his direction, then looked away. A receptionist was busy organizing paperwork without acknowledging him. The old gentleman never complained, never waved anyone over, never looked irritated. He simply observed, watching faces, watching lips, watching body language. Something about the way his eyes followed conversations immediately reminded me of someone. My Uncle Daniel. He'd gradually lost his hearing years earlier. Learning sign language had started as a way to keep talking with him. Eventually, it became something neither of us even thought about. The old man wasn't listening with his ears. He was reading the room, exactly the way Uncle Daniel always had. Without thinking twice, I walked over. He looked up calmly. His expression carried neither hope nor disappointment, just quiet patience. I smiled, then raised my hands. Good morning. I signed naturally. Are you waiting for someone? For the first time, his face changed. Not dramatically. Just enough. The guarded look he'd been carrying melted into genuine surprise, then relief. He answered in fluent American Sign Language. Yes, I have a meeting upstairs. His movements were smooth, confident, the signs of someone who had been deaf for many years. I wasn't sure who to ask. Who are you meeting? I signed. A tiny smile crossed his face. The chief executive officer. I blinked. The CEO? He nodded. I believe he may have forgotten I'm here. There was humor in his expression, not bitterness. That struck me. Most people would have been furious. He simply seemed amused. I'll call upstairs, I signed. Thank you. He looked directly into my eyes before adding something that stayed with me forever. You're the first person who's spoken to me today. Those words hit harder than I expected. Not because they were dramatic. Because they were true. Dozens of people had already walked past him. Not one had stopped. I walked to the reception phone and called the executive floor. After 2 rings, the CEO's executive assistant answered. Executive office, this is Melissa. Hi Melissa, this is Ethan Carter from operations. There's an older gentleman downstairs waiting for the CEO. I think he's been here for a while. Silence, not ordinary silence. The kind that instantly tells you something is wrong. Then her voice returned. Higher, tighter. What did you just say? There's a gentleman waiting in the lobby. Another pause. Then oh no, her professional tone cracked. Ethan, please don't let him leave. We're coming downstairs immediately. The line disconnected. I stared at the receiver. That reaction didn't make sense. Not yet. When I returned, the old gentleman smiled politely. "They're on their way," I signed. He nodded, then studied me carefully. "How long have you known sign language?" "About 12 years. My uncle lost his hearing. I wanted him to know he never had to feel alone." His eyes softened. "That says a great deal about you." I laughed awkwardly. "I'm just doing what anyone should." He slowly shook his head. "No." His hands moved deliberately. "Most people don't." Those 4 words settled heavily in my chest. For reasons I couldn't explain, I felt as though this stranger wasn't merely talking about sign language. He was talking about character, about the choices people make when they believe nobody important is watching. Neither of us realized it yet. But someone very important was already on their way down. The elevator doors slid open. 3 people stepped into the lobby. The first was the CEO's executive assistant, Melissa, moving faster than I'd ever seen anyone walk in a corporate office. Behind her came a tall man in an immaculate navy suit. Silver streaks lined his dark hair. His expression was calm, but his pace told another story. He wasn't walking. He was trying very hard not to run. The moment he saw the elderly gentleman sitting beside me, relief flooded across his face. He crossed the marble floor in seconds. "Dad." His voice cracked. "I'm so sorry." He stopped directly in front of the old man before lowering himself to eye level. "I should have made sure someone was waiting downstairs. This is completely unacceptable." The elderly man smiled gently. He lifted one hand. A silent gesture. "Enough." Then he signed something that made the CEO smile despite his obvious embarrassment. I've survived worse than waiting in a comfortable chair. I couldn't help smiling. There was warmth between them, the kind only family shares. The CEO chuckled before answering in sign language slowly. "Imperfectly, I know. But you shouldn't have had to." Then his eyes shifted toward me. He looked from my face to my hands. "You sign?" "Yes, sir. My uncle lost his hearing years ago. I learned so we could keep talking." For several seconds he simply stared at me. Not awkwardly, not suspiciously. Carefully, almost like he was trying to remember something. Finally he asked, "What's your name?" "Ethan Carter." "And how long have you worked here?" "Almost 11 years." "What department?" "Operations." He repeated my name quietly. Ethan Carter. As though committing it to memory. The older gentleman watched the entire exchange with quiet amusement, almost like he'd already figured something out. The CEO extended his hand. "Thank you." Not the automatic corporate thank you people throw around. A genuine one. "My father told me you were the only person who stopped." I shrugged. It wasn't a big deal. The old man immediately signed something. The CEO laughed, then translated. "My father says, to decent people, kindness never feels like a big deal." Before I could answer, the CEO gently helped his father to his feet. "I hope we'll speak again, Ethan. I'm sure we will." I smiled politely. Honestly, I assumed he was simply being courteous. I grabbed my laptop bag and headed upstairs. Within minutes I was buried in spreadsheets, shipping schedules and supplier calls. Life returned to normal. Or so I thought. Around 11 that morning, my coworker Jenna practically sprinted across the office toward my desk. "Ethan," she whispered loudly. "Did you speak to an elderly man downstairs this morning?" "Yeah, he was waiting for someone." She stared at me. "No," she whispered. "You have absolutely no idea who that was." I frowned. He introduced himself as, then it hit me. The surname. The one I'd completely ignored because I was rushing to work. Richard Thornton. Thornton. As in, Thornton Logistics Group. The company founder. The man whose picture hung in every corporate hallway. The billionaire entrepreneur who had built Northbridge from 2 delivery trucks into one of the largest logistics companies in America. The man who still owned nearly half the company despite retiring years earlier. My stomach dropped. That was Richard Thornton? Jenna nodded so hard I thought she might hurt herself. The founder. The chairman of the board. The CEO's father. The man everyone panics about whenever he visits. I leaned back in my chair. My brain replayed every second from the lobby. His patience. His kindness. His words. "You're the first person who stopped." Suddenly, they carried an entirely different meaning. By lunchtime, whispers were moving through every department. People had heard Richard Thornton had arrived unnoticed. Employees quietly wondered how anyone could have left the company's founder sitting alone in the lobby. Others insisted somebody at reception would probably lose their job. Nobody knew the whole story. Except me. That evening I told Emily everything over dinner. She listened without interrupting, the way she always did. When I finished, she smiled. "So, what do you think happens next?" I laughed. "Nothing." "Why?" "Because nothing ever happens. I've spent 11 years believing hard work gets noticed. It doesn't. This won't be any different." Emily slowly reached across the kitchen table and placed her hand over mine. "You've been disappointed so many times that you've started protecting yourself by expecting nothing." I looked down. She was right. I just don't want to get my hopes up. She smiled softly. "I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you not to bury them." Before I could answer, my mobile phone buzzed. Unknown number. Normally I would have ignored it. Instead, something told me to answer. "Ethan Carter speaking." A calm female voice replied. "Good afternoon, Mr. Carter. This is Melissa, from the Office of the Chief Executive Officer. The CEO would like to meet with you tomorrow morning." My heart skipped a beat. He specifically requested that no one else be informed. I swallowed. "I'll be there." After hanging up, Emily looked at my face. She didn't need to ask. She already knew. Somewhere inside Northbridge Logistics, a door had just opened. And Victor Hale had absolutely no idea. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I replayed the same scene over and over again. The old gentleman sitting quietly in the lobby. The way he smiled when I greeted him in sign language. The CEO rushing downstairs. And finally, Melissa's phone call. "The CEO would like to meet with you tomorrow morning." My alarm went off at 5:30 a.m., even though I'd already been awake for nearly an hour. Emily noticed the dark circles under my eyes while pouring coffee. "Nervous?" I laughed. Terrified, she walked over, straightened my tie, and smiled. "Whatever happens today, don't make yourself smaller just because someone important is in the room." Those words stayed with me all morning. Northbridge Logistics looked exactly the same as always. Employees hurried through the lobby. Phones rang. Printers hummed. Victor Hale stood outside his glass office, barking instructions before most people had even logged in. Nothing seemed different, except me. At exactly 9:00 a.m., Melissa appeared beside my desk. "Mr. Carter, the CEO is ready for you." An uncomfortable silence spread across the office. Everyone looked up, including Victor. His eyebrows narrowed. "Executive floor?" Melissa nodded politely. "Yes," Victor forced a smile. "What did you do?" I shrugged. "I'm not sure." For the first time in years, I saw uncertainty on his face. As the elevator doors closed, I caught him watching me. Not with confidence. With concern. The executive floor felt like another world. Soft lighting. Original artwork. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Chicago. Melissa guided me into a spacious office. The CEO, Daniel Thornton, stood by the window. Instead of sitting behind his enormous desk, he walked over and shook my hand. "Thank you for coming, Ethan." His tone wasn't formal. It was sincere. "Please, sit." I did. For several moments, neither of us spoke. Finally, Daniel smiled. "My father hasn't stopped talking about you." I blinked. "I'm sorry?" He said something interesting. Daniel leaned forward. He said, "You were the only employee who actually saw him." I don't mean recognized him. I mean saw him as a person. I didn't know how to respond. I was just trying to help. "My father disagrees." Daniel smiled. "He believes character is revealed when kindness offers no reward." The room fell quiet again. Then he asked a question I never expected. "Ethan, tell me honestly, what has your experience been like working here?" Not the rehearsed answer. The real one. I hesitated. This was dangerous. Years of corporate life had taught me one rule. Never tell senior executives the truth. Tell them what makes them comfortable. Daniel must have noticed my hesitation. "You have my word. There will be no consequences for honesty." I took a slow breath. Then I told him everything. The missed promotions. The unpaid overtime. The projects I'd rescued. The praise that somehow always landed on Victor's desk. I even repeated Victor's exact words from our meeting weeks earlier. "You're lucky we even pay you what we do. People would replace you for less." Daniel didn't interrupt once. He simply listened. completely still. When I finished, he opened a folder lying on the table. I spent yesterday reviewing your personnel file. He slid several documents toward me. Performance reviews, project reports, client evaluations. Every page praised my work. Every page described leadership. Every page recommended greater responsibility. Yet somehow, nothing had ever happened. Daniel looked me straight in the eye. Ethan, you should have been promoted years ago. A lump formed in my throat. This company failed you, not the other way around. For the first time in over a decade, someone had finally said the words I'd been waiting to hear. I couldn't speak. Daniel continued. My father reminded me to look beyond job titles. When I did, I found someone already performing executive-level work. He smiled. So I'd like to correct that mistake. He slid one final folder across the table. Inside was a new employment contract. Vice President of Operations. I stared at it, certain I'd misread it. This can't be real. It is. The position reports directly to me. My hands actually trembled. Then came the question I had to ask. Is this because I helped your father? Daniel shook his head immediately. No. My father simply showed me where to look. What I found you earned years ago. Tears threatened to escape. I fought them back. After 11 years of feeling invisible, someone had finally seen me. I slowly picked up the pen, then signed my name. Daniel stood and smiled. Congratulations, Vice President Carter. As we shook hands, neither of us noticed the email Melissa had already scheduled. An announcement that would reach every employee in exactly 2 hours, including one man, Victor Hale, the man who had spent years convincing me I wasn't leadership material. Within minutes, his entire world was about to collapse. There are moments in life when justice doesn't arrive with shouting. It arrives quietly. One email, one sentence, one truth. At exactly 2:00 p.m., every computer inside Northbridge Logistics chimed at the same time. A new company-wide announcement appeared. Subject: leadership appointment. The office gradually became silent. Conversations stopped. Keyboards froze. Coffee mugs hovered halfway to people's lips. I sat at my old desk, pretending to review inventory reports, while my heart pounded against my ribs. The announcement read, effective immediately. Ethan Carter has been appointed Vice President of Operations and will report directly to Chief Executive Officer Daniel Thornton. Please join us in congratulating Ethan on this well-earned promotion. Well-earned. 2 simple words. Yet they carried 11 years of invisible work. Across the office, heads slowly lifted from computer screens. Several co-workers looked at me. Others looked toward Victor's office. Everyone waited. 3 minutes later, Victor's glass door swung open. He stepped outside with the expression of a man trying desperately to convince himself he'd misunderstood what he'd just read. He walked directly toward my desk. Every footstep echoed across the silent office. Ethan. His voice sounded strangely weak. I looked up. Yes, Victor? I just saw the announcement. So did I. He forced an awkward smile. Vice President? Congratulations, thank you. There was another long silence. His eyes searched my face, trying to solve a puzzle that suddenly no longer made sense. I wasn't aware this position was being filled. Neither was I. He frowned. When did this happen? This morning. His expression twitched. This morning? Yes, he blinked twice. This doesn't make any sense. I smiled politely. Sometimes life surprises us. For the first time since I'd known him, Victor had absolutely nothing to say. The man who always had answers had none. I stood, picked up my coffee mug, and looked him directly in the eye. You once told me I was lucky just to have a job here. His face tightened. I remember. I've been thinking about that conversation. I have too, he admitted quietly. I nodded. You were right about one thing. His eyebrows lifted. I was lucky. He looked confused. I was lucky, because eventually someone noticed the truth. Then I smiled. A genuine smile. Not cruel, not arrogant, just peaceful. Have a good afternoon, Victor. I walked away. Behind me, he remained standing beside my empty desk, completely speechless. My new office was on the 20th floor. Large windows overlooked the Chicago skyline. For several minutes, I simply stood there staring outside. The city hadn't changed. But somehow, everything felt different. There was no anger left, only relief. Then came the real work. Daniel had asked me to conduct a complete operational review of every department. It wasn't about revenge. It was about understanding how the company actually functioned. I spent the next 2 days buried in reports, vendor contracts, promotion histories, budget approvals, performance evaluations, thousands of documents. Patterns slowly emerged. At first they seemed like coincidences. Then they became impossible to ignore. Every major account turnaround had one thing in common. The hard work came from junior managers. The public credit somehow landed with Victor. Employees with outstanding reviews remained in the same positions for years. Average performers somehow climbed the corporate ladder. The more I investigated, the darker the picture became. Late Friday afternoon, I opened an old supplier agreement. Something immediately caught my attention. A regional transport company had been receiving unusually favorable contracts for nearly 4 years. The pricing made no business sense. I checked ownership records. My stomach tightened. The transport company belonged to Victor Hale's brother-in-law. I froze. No, I whispered. There had to be another explanation. I opened more files, then more. Every document pointed in the same direction. Conflict of interest, hidden financial benefits, possible procurement fraud. None of it had been reported. None of it had been disclosed. I leaned back slowly. For years, Victor hadn't just stolen recognition. He may have been stealing from the company itself. This wasn't office politics anymore. This was something far bigger. I printed every document, every email, every approval record. No assumptions, no accusations, just facts. Exactly 12 pages. Nothing more, nothing less. As I slipped the report into a folder, I remembered something Victor had once told me. People like you aren't leaders. I looked down at the evidence in my hands. Leadership wasn't about power. It wasn't about expensive suits. It wasn't about taking credit. Leadership meant protecting people, protecting the truth, even when it was uncomfortable. I picked up the phone. Melissa, could you arrange 30 minutes with Daniel Thornton? There was a brief pause. Tomorrow morning at 10? I'll be there. After hanging up, I looked once more at Victor's office through the glass walls across the building. He was laughing with another manager, completely relaxed, completely confident. He had no idea that the folder resting on my desk contained enough evidence to destroy everything he had built through lies. And by this time tomorrow, his career would be over. The next morning, I walked into the executive conference room carrying nothing more than a slim black folder. 12 pages. No dramatic accusations, no emotional speeches, just evidence. Cold, clear, undeniable, Melissa opened the door. Mr. Thornton, we'll see you now. Daniel Thornton stood beside the conference table, coffee in one hand and several reports in the other. He smiled. Morning, Ethan. Morning, you sounded serious. I am. I placed the folder on the polished oak table. I found something during the operational review. His smile disappeared. What kind of something? The kind every CEO deserves to know. He sat down immediately. So, let's see it. For the next 20 minutes, the room remained almost completely silent. The only sounds were pages turning, pens making notes, and Daniel occasionally asking short questions. Where did this contract originate? Who approved this payment? How many years has this been happening? I answered every question with documentation. No opinions, no assumptions, only facts. Finally, Daniel reached the last page. He slowly removed his glasses, then leaned back. His face had changed, not with anger, with disappointment, deep disappointment. He looked at me for several long seconds. You discovered all of this during a routine operational review? Yes, you weren't investigating Victor personally? No, I wasn't looking for revenge. I was doing my job. Daniel nodded slowly. I believe you. He closed the folder. I'll be involving legal, internal audit, and human resources immediately. I expected that. He stood and walked toward the window overlooking the Chicago skyline. When my father told me to promote you, I thought I was correcting one mistake. He looked back at me. I didn't realize I was exposing another. I remained silent. Then Daniel asked something unexpected. Can I ask you a personal question? Of course. When Victor humiliated you, when he stole your work, when he convinced you that you didn't deserve more, didn't you ever want revenge? I thought carefully before answering. I wanted respect. I wanted fairness. I wanted someone to tell me the truth. I paused. But revenge? I shook my head. If revenge had become my goal, I would have become exactly like him. Daniel smiled faintly. My father was right about you. The investigation moved faster than anyone expected. Legal teams arrived before lunch. Outside consultants were brought in. Company laptops were collected. Financial records were secured. Rumors spread through every department. Nobody knew exactly what was happening. Everyone knew something was wrong. Victor continued walking through the office like nothing had changed, greeting people, laughing loudly, giving orders. He had absolutely no idea the walls were already closing around him. At 3:15 p.m., Melissa appeared outside his office. Mr. Hale? The CEO would like to see you. Victor smiled confidently. Of course. He straightened his expensive jacket, adjusted his tie, then followed her upstairs. Several employees exchanged nervous glances. One whispered, "That can't be good." I said nothing. I simply returned to reviewing supplier reports. 45 minutes later, the executive elevator opened again. Victor stepped out. But he wasn't alone. A human resources director walked beside him. So did the company's legal counsel. And two uniformed security officers. The entire office fell silent. Victor's face had lost all its color. His confident smile was gone. His shoulders seemed smaller. Older, defeated, he walked directly into his office without speaking. 5 minutes later, he emerged carrying a cardboard box. Inside were framed photographs, a desk plant, a few notebooks. 11 years of arrogance, reduced to one small box. No dramatic shouting. No public argument. No final speech. Just silence. As he walked toward the exit, our eyes met for the first time that day. He stopped. It looked as though he wanted to say something. Perhaps an apology. Perhaps an excuse. Perhaps blame. Instead, nothing came out. He lowered his eyes, turned away, and continued walking. The automatic doors opened, then closed behind him. That was it. The man who had controlled my life for years disappeared without applause, without dignity, without power. Later that evening, Daniel called me into his office once more. The board has reviewed the preliminary findings. He smiled. Ethan, because you chose integrity over revenge, you've earned something even greater than a promotion. He slid another envelope across the desk. I opened it, then froze. Inside was an official recommendation from Richard Thornton himself, the company founder. He was recommending that my position as vice president be expanded to include a permanent seat on the board of directors. I looked up, speechless. Daniel smiled. My father says companies succeed because of people who do the right thing, especially when nobody is watching. My eyes drifted toward the window. A few weeks earlier, I had walked into the lobby believing I was invisible. Now, my greatest reward wasn't defeating Victor Hale. It was discovering that integrity always leaves a witness, even when you don't realize someone is watching. People think revenge is loud. They imagine screaming matches, public humiliation, a dramatic confession, someone falling to their knees, begging for forgiveness. Real life rarely works that way. Real revenge is quieter. It happens when the truth finally catches up to a lie. 3 weeks after Victor Hale left Northbridge Logistics, I received another call from Melissa. "Ethan," she said, warmly. "Mr. Richard Thornton would like to meet with you." "The founder?" "Yes, he specifically asked for you." "I'll be there." Richard Thornton was waiting in the executive boardroom. The afternoon sun poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting a golden glow across the polished table. He stood near the glass, hands resting lightly on his cane. When I entered, he turned and smiled. Then, without hesitation, he greeted me in sign language. "Good afternoon, Ethan," I smiled back. "It's good to see you again, Richard," he laughed. "Much better. I was afraid you'd start calling me Mr. Thornton forever." I chuckled before taking a seat across from him. For a few moments, neither of us spoke. Sometimes silence says more than words ever could. Finally, Richard looked at me with the same thoughtful expression he'd worn the day we first met in the lobby. "You look different." I tilted my head. "In what way?" He smiled. "When we first met, you looked like a man carrying the weight of the world. Today, you look free." I looked out across the Chicago skyline. He was right. For years I'd carried frustration, disappointment, bitterness. Not anymore. "I heard what happened to Victor," Richard signed. "I imagine you did. He made his own choices." "He did. Richard nodded slowly. You could have embarrassed him. You could have gone straight to the board. You could have made yourself look like the hero. I smiled. I didn't want my story to become about him. He studied me for several seconds before reaching into his leather briefcase. He placed a single envelope on the table. This is why I asked you here. I opened it carefully. Halfway through the first page, I stopped breathing. It was an official recommendation to the board of directors, signed personally by Richard Thornton. The recommendation proposed expanding my role as vice president and appointing me as the newest member of the company's executive board. I looked back at him in disbelief. I don't know what to say. He smiled. Say yes. 6 weeks later, the recommendation became official. For the first time in the company's history, someone had risen from operations coordinator to the executive board, without political games, without manipulation, without stepping on anyone else, only through integrity. That morning I walked into the boardroom wearing the same simple navy suit I'd owned for years. Nothing about me had changed, except confidence. As I took my seat beside senior executives, I thought back to Victor's office. People like you aren't leaders. I almost laughed. Leadership had never been about job titles. Leadership was about character. The meeting began. Contracts were discussed. Future investments. Expansion plans. Then Daniel Thornton looked around the table. I'd like everyone to welcome our newest board member, Ethan Carter. Polite applause filled the room, but the loudest voice in my mind belonged to my father. Character always beats shortcuts. He'd been right all along. That evening I arrived home earlier than usual. Emily opened the front door before I even reached it. She looked at my face, then smiled. You got it. I nodded. I got it. She threw her arms around me. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Our children came running into the hallway. Dad, how was the meeting? I laughed. It went pretty well. My daughter raised an eyebrow. Pretty well? Emily grinned. Tell them. I looked at both kids. Dad joined the board of directors today. My son blinked twice. Does that mean you're famous now? I laughed. No. It means I have more responsibility. He thought for a moment before smiling. So, can we still order pizza tonight? Emily burst into laughter. I nodded. I think we've earned it. Months passed. Northbridge became a different company. Promotions became transparent. Performance was rewarded. Managers were held accountable. Employees were encouraged to speak honestly. Several overlooked workers received long overdue opportunities. Watching them succeed gave me more satisfaction than any title ever could. One afternoon, while walking through the lobby, I noticed something that made me stop. A delivery driver stood awkwardly near reception, unsure where to go. Without thinking, a young employee walked over, smiled, and helped him. No one had asked her to. No executive was watching. She simply chose kindness. Richard's words echoed in my mind. The true measure of a person is what they do when nobody is watching. That single sentence had changed my life, not because it earned me a promotion, because it reminded me that success built on character lasts forever. Success built on ego never does. Victor Hale lost his career because of the choices he made. I found mine because of a choice that took less than 30 seconds, stopping to help a stranger everyone else ignored. And that was the greatest revenge of all. Because in the end, I didn't just prove Victor wrong. I proved that kindness, integrity, and quiet courage will always outlast arrogance. If you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or made to feel invisible, remember this. Never let someone else's opinion decide your worth. Keep showing up. Keep doing the right thing. Because one day the right person will notice. And when they do, your entire life can change. If this story inspired you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more unforgettable revenge stories. And tell us in the comments, what would you have done if you were in Ethan's position? Until next time. Remember this, karma doesn't rush. It simply never forgets.